Hello, everybody, and welcome back on today's episode: Fire Emblem Objectives and Map Design for D&D by yours truly. So, what is an emblem and why is it on fire? Fire Emblem is a game franchise. It has blown up in the last decade thanks to Awakening, Fates, and Three Houses. It is a strategy JRPG with many characters journeying to complete some kind of massive goal, either it be political stability, being the centerpiece of a revolution, or slaying an ancient god. That one happens quite a bit. Doesn't that sound familiar? Unlike D&D, the characters the player gets are somewhat rigid in their own growth rates and base stats and even classes for the most part. This is all determined by the game designers themselves. So it's a little bit more designed like a video game. Because the individual characters in the game are a lot more simple than D&D characters, the systems of other gameplay take a massive advantage and spice up combat for the player character. Characters can gain skills, or map design can be quite complex, or objectives can be quite vast. So, you may have seen common problems with D&D combat. So many people have already brought up in many videos about problem with D&D combat. One of them being not with the system itself, but with battle maps and objectives being too similar or too samey. That is the same word I just said twice. For new DMs, it's quite hard to get a grasp of combat and let alone map design, so I understand why that could take some time to develop. But trying to make sure the seeds of improvement are there should have really been in the DMG itself. And I don't think it's quite there yet in that aspect, which is why I'm making this video. As for objectives, most combats end when all the enemies are dead, while some other suggestions in the DMG suggest either enemies retreating once they're less than half of their own size, or the party just being out there for their own survival. But there could be a lot more interesting objectives here. As for map design, I find that most of the maps are well drawn, but they often lack interesting features of actual combat terrain or mechanics, such as height. Walls, corridors are often there, but are missing some map uniqueness. So we're going to talk about Fire Emblem objectives. In Fire Emblem, there are plenty of objectives, but these are the main five. Rout, which means to defeat all enemies present. Some enemies will stay and put for characters to approach them in line of sight, so the characters will normally have to travel the course of the map or chapter laid out for them. Defeat boss. Defeat boss or bosses present. Normally they're placed at towards the end of the map, but not always. C's. Get to a point of interest, such as a throne, if you're playing Fire Emblem 6, which is every map pretty much. But these thrones are normally guarded by bosses themselves, but this does mean that sometimes they can be placed a little bit closer to about maybe the two-thirds point of a chapter. Then there's defend or survive. This is technically two wrapped into the one, so it could be either defend yourself or defend a point of interest. We will get into this a lot more. And normally there is a turn count tied to this as well. And then lastly is escape. Make sure all your units retreat to a point of interest, such as a door, a gateway, or some kind of exit. So, how would I apply these to D&D? Well, I think rout and defeat boss are quite self-explanatory. I think you've had definitely a rout be the most common objective, just to defeat all the enemies. And normally, when you defeat a boss in a boss encounter, normally the combat ends there by the DM, as they describe their minions either fleeing or just dying outright. However, the other three can be more interesting. So for Siege can be quite interesting. You can create a simple object that the party has to work towards getting. You can task the party with infiltrating a castle to open up the gates for a siege. You can also just have them join the siege and take on a whole castle themselves, and have that be the objective. There's defending and surviving. In both of these objectives, there's normally a time limit, as I mentioned earlier. In Fire Emblem, it's normally 10 to 11 rounds. However, for D&D, I recommend 5, maybe 6, just because of how long turns actually play out. They're usually an endless wave of reinforcements that try to assault the player's position, or that just focus on getting to the objectives and ignoring the players altogether, which would be quite dangerous. And then finally, there's escape. Escaping usually has hazards of enemies stopping the players from advancing, as well as a chasing force which constantly goes after the players, normally being a far stronger number that can reasonably be handled, to use as a softer time limit than the actual time limited. Going on to map design and tiles. So, Fire Emblem map design part 1. There are plenty of different tiles in the game. There is common, plains, floors, you name it. They provide no benefits or no negatives. They are just a normal tile. Then there are forests. A common forest in Fire Emblem maps, or these could be pillars or even villages. They would normally provide a +1 to defense and a +20 to offense. Sorry, to offense. Avoid. In Fire Emblem, the hit rate is a base percent chance of 100. So this would be equivalent to 4, a +4 for D&D, to your AC. And then a flat -1 to damage. And then there's also better tiles like thickets, which can provide more cases of avoid. There are mountains, which are normally even more difficult. Sorry, it also does require um, more movement to move through, so it would be considered a difficult terrain. Then there's mountains, which are even more difficult and more exclusive to certain units, except for those who can fly, who don't gain the benefits but can move over the tile. And normally provides +2 to defense and 30 or above to avoid, depending on where you are in the mountain. There are also heal tiles and forts, which provide a 5 to 10 flat healing or 10 to 20% healing, and a lot of avoid. They also cost a point of movement. Then there is C, which is access to some units, which is normally treated as a untouchable tile, and give some slight avoid. Going on to roads. Normally this will give access to mounted units a little bit of a chance to move, giving them about a 30% extra movement depending on what game you're playing in. And it's not in every single game. Then there are deserts, which are more of a hindrance. This terrain normally would sacrifice 2 movement tiles, except if you are something of a light class, like even rogue get affected, but magic units don't, as well as flying units don't, just like they don't affect any tiles movements. And then mounted units get heavily penalized, the ones that are on the ground, like most of the cavalry you have, and they can only move 1 to 2 tiles per turn, which really sucks. It does provide a small avoidance boost, but it's mostly hindrance tile. Then there are swamps, which not only provide, which cost 2 movement or 3 on a mount, but they also take away 5 to 10, 5 or 10% HP depending on the game, which just sucks. They are an annoying hazard. And then there are gates or thrones. These are normally where bosses like to sit to get extra defense, avoid to a great extent, as well as a healing, a very nice defensive position. And then finally, in recent games, there are power tiles, which usually provide a +3 to strength or magic. And then there are defensive tiles, which do the same, which normally provide a +4 or +4 to resistance, with a little bit of an avoid. And then there's simply impassable terrain, just walls, rivers, seas, mountains, lava. Sometimes just gaps like air that can sometimes be flown over, but normally are inaccessible to get around. All right, so how do we apply this to D&D? Plains, self-explanatory, we're good there. Forest, pillars, and villages. So D&D kind of already has a cover system. It is half cover and 3/4 cover and full cover. Half cover normally provides a +2 to AC and a +2 to Dex saving throws. This can translate one just very nicely, and you can also just give characters a flat -1 to the final damage being dealt to them, just reducing it by just that little bit. Now, it would cost difficult. It would be difficult terrain, which would make sense towards translating it to D&D. Now, for mountains and peaks, or just more rugged and defensive positions, you can make it 3/4 cover, which provides a +5 to AC and Dex saves. And you can change it to be very difficult terrain, which would be per every 15 feet of movement, you can make it, for every 5 cost of movement, you can make it 15 feet instead. Very nice there. Healing supplies. The only thing I would say is in Fire Emblem, you're able to just sit on a healing tile and heal your unit fully up. In Dungeons & Dragons, I would not recommend that. I would recommend it using hit die, and I put it here, 1 hit die per your Constitution modifier, plus your Constitution modifier that you can expend on this space if you want to. You can also give this feature more the same defensive abilities that the Forest Village and Pillars do. But again, I would not provide infinite healing to your players. Make them expend a resource. Then there's Sea and Water. Bodies of water can go up to knee-deep already difficult terrain in Dungeons & Dragons. So you can provide them with probably something like quarter cover if they have a swim speed and they're aquatic and they're more adaptable in these situations, which provide a +1 to AC and dexterity saving throws. Then there are roads. You can simply give them a 30% increase when being on roads. I'm not really sure about this one. It does seem kind of strong. I mean, mountain combatants already have enough speed, so I think they're fine, but if you have a bigger open map, but a very difficult terrain outside of certain areas, then you might want to go with the roads for that. As for desert, you can just make it difficult terrain. You can maybe give them quarter cover, a +1 to AC and Dex saving throws. For swamps, the same thing, and they can take either acid or poison damage, a d8's worth. At the end of your turn, you can increase or decrease that die number up to you. Or you can just make it a stagnant number as well. Gates and thrones, you can make this 3/4 cover, a flat -2 to damage received. Make it difficult terrain as well. And a character can use 2 hit die for healing plus their Constitution modifiers when ending their turn on the space. Actually, it should be the start of their turn. That's a mistake. It should be the start of their turn. And then power tiles probably adds a +2 to attack and damage rolls when on the space, and then a flat -4 damage resistance when on the defensive tile space. And then being the impassable terrains are self-explanatory as well. So we're going to go into analyzing my favorite Fire Emblem maps. Note, I've played about half of the game's franchise so far, so it may not be considered what is the best maps, but these are maps that I find quite exceptional of where they're placed. Alright, Camilla in the thumbnail, let's go. So, unhappy reunion from Fire Emblem Fates Conquest. This is considered the best defense chapter. Unfortunately, I couldn't get a good image of the whole thing, so this is the best we got. It is a 10 round defense, showing ends on turn 11. It is a 10 round defense of this checkpoint up here at the top, where you are given a small army of 10 units to defend 4 choke points. Here is the map laid out in its entirety. So yeah, 10 deployment spots, 4 checkpoints. The first 2 to the left have a wall. I think it has 50 hit points on it, but it will soon crack due to the reinforcements spawning up here in the top left, and the more reinforcements spawning on the left as well. So yeah, you have to defend these 4 spaces up here. There is a secondary objectives that encourage the player to also spread out and collect them. There is the Master Seal right over here. There is 1,000 gold pieces over here. There is a Draco Shield and a Dual Club, which is the only Dual Club you'll get in the run for being Norian. So that's very important. It changes the weapon triangle and doubles it. And the Draco Shield is nice. So this encourages your army to not only branch out, but also go on the offense. You have AoE siege tomes located here, here, and here. We can see them on the map. There, and there. So the orb is only for magic units. You have 2 of that, and then the ballista is only for the archery units, which you have 1 of. You could get a second, depending on what you reclass. And then finally, there are your own player reinforcements. As much as you start off with only 10, you get 3 more, that being Baruka, Selena, and Camilla. Camilla is such a massive help for not only this chapter, but going forward. She is what is known as the Oifi archetype, where you get a high-level unit that stays good for the rest of the game. She has great damage output, not only for magic and physical and magical attacks, but also for receiving damage. She has strong magical and physical resistance. So she can mostly solo one of these 4 flanking points, and you're gonna need her help. Because there is a phase 2. And during phase 2, Takumi drains all this water here. All this water goes away. This opens up about 3 more points of interest that just make it faster for the enemies to just invade. Normally they couldn't cross the lake, and now they can. So it makes, if you weren't aggressive beforehand, now you're going to get punished for it, because an overwhelming majority of those enemies that weren't defeated are going to flank around the back line. And then once again, and then also the mini bosses Oboro, which she is here, and Hinata, which she is here, will then start to aggress upon your position. And they will make it to that end tile in time, or be strong enough to take out one of your units, so you better be prepared. Enemy reinforcements are designed to also just reach the checkpoint, consisting of Pegasus Knights, which just try to rush to the checkpoint. They can make it in about 2 to 3 turns for the most part. They are very dangerous, and they normally group up in pairs. There's Oni Warriors, which are pretty tanky to stop, Archers, which can be annoying, Ninjas, which debuff you. But the good thing is these reinforcements all stop on turn 7, which is when Takumi gets rid of the lake. So you have 3 more turns after that. Alright, for the freedom of Fodland. Fire Emblem 3 Houses, Verdant Wind, Chapter 22, the Endgame. So on this map, you try and fight the ancestors of Fodland. And they possess the exact same ancient magical weapons that you do, and their stats are pretty much bloated. So you don't only have to kill 1 boss, you have to kill 11. Each of the ancestors are surrounded in this swamp area here. There's also a mini boss down here. I want to say it's mini boss. Maybe that's the mini boss. I can't remember. And each of these 10 elites gives Nemesis, because of his Mighty King of Legend feature, a +3 to all of his stats while they're still alive. So he's got a flat +30, as well as he can nullify 1 damage per round. What makes this map even more difficult is that there is a massive swamp that deals damage to the living. It ignores flyers, like last time. There is also still loot on this map, and you can gain a magical lance that could help you in the fight. The top here, or 2 other stat boosters. Finally, enemy types are very different, but they all coagulate on the same routes. So if you go on the top here, you're mostly going to be facing swords and lance units. If you go on the bottom here, you're mostly going to be facing fist and magic units. While in the middle, we have some axe fighters and archers. So it encourages your army to divide and conquer. Ambush spawns come in from the south. If you don't kill them in time, kill that mini boss down there. If you want to clear out the top of the map too, you're going to need to probably avoid the bow knights or archers in the center of the map that really hold this as a nice strong defensive hold for the enemy. Even though you can clearly go through, it is health. The 10 elites are also made up of different classes, which require different units to go after them. So it's really a matter of clearing off the sides of the map for conjugating your army as one into the center to rip and sunder your way through the enemy. And that being said, the boss, even though you've gone through all this trouble, the boss is no pushover either. He can once shot most of your units, and you need to make sure you have a nice strong army to take him out before he counters with his gambits, which could either cripple or even outright kill the unit. Alright, lastly here we have Griffith's Citadel, Shadows of Valencia. This is Chapter 3's 5th map. Alright, most of the people are making fun of, no, it's Valencia, hey, map design's bad. I personally think this map is a standout. The reason why is, well, one thing I really like about Valencia is that you get to use your whole army throughout the whole game. There's also the DLC spots right there, as you can see. But you are tasked with just defeating everyone. It's a route map in the Citadel. And unlike the last Citadel maps, which was Archer Hell, this one's a little bit more balanced between all the classes you've faced up to this point. There are witches who will teleport behind you. There are archers who can shoot way over the wall. Mages who can do the same. And myrmidons who are fast enough and strong enough to take and shrug off a couple of hits, as well as an endless reinforcements from the Cantor up in Griffith's room, which spawn the fire skeletons. I forgot what their name was, but they're pretty tanky. In addition, not being in the base, or actually, well, the base provides a flat, like about 20% avoid for everyone in it. So you want to be on the same playing field and get inside as quickly as possible, but getting through either one of the doors is a lot of work, especially since there's sand right in front. There's also a Myrmidon over here, but you can deal with that guy pretty easily. So, countering this map, one word, Jenny. Normally she will be level 12 or level 13 at this point, so it'll be fine. She has 3 things going for her. At level 4 she gets Invoke. Invoke spawns an endless wave of minions for yourself. These can be used as cannon fodder and will take on more of the brutal hits going in. The second is Physic, which she can heal out of range, and the third one is Expel, which means she can get rid of the cannon fodder of endless fire skeletons that they send at you. And it could take on a good Expel doesn't work 100% of the time, but it has like about a 60% chance, I want to say, with these guys of outright just killing them. So she can counter a lot of the BS thrown your way. As for the teleporting witches, she can also tank it. She has got a lot of resistance, as well as normally you can get a Dread Fighter Saber at this point, if you've been playing your cards right, who can also tank a lot of the magical attacks. As for Pala and Katria, the 2 Pegasi you have, they can fly over the walls. And they can take out normally one side of the Major Archer. You can pick between them, and what will also help is Leon or the other mages also helping you counterattack the mages and archers that are helping you at a distance. And then normally, because of all this, your frontline Myrmidon, that and Valbar, they can really no longer have to worry about taking the brunt of the main army forces and can just go to town on anyone in their path. So now we get two maps I've made based off of these FE design map features. I've been making these maps for the whole year. Not for the whole. I've been making maps throughout the whole year, and here are my best ones, I want to say. So this first one was a Manchun. This was a defense map. It was a one-shot I ran, and the whole purpose was a 10-turn defense map against an army led by Manchun. Well, a second Manchun, because this is taking the Manchun words, was defending the keep and needed to concentrate on a spell, so the player characters had to defend it. This map focused on a altering battlefield, much like that of an unhappy reunion. On the left side, you see what it started off. On the right side, you see what ended up happening. There was a dragon that flew over that took away the frontline barrier to the keep. The drawbridge can be retracted. That was another option. That was turn 3. Turn 5, 2 druids came in from the sides and opened up the waterways, making it have 3 points of entry. A dragon came in on turn 6 and knocked down the parts of the wall, leading a unguarded pathway directly to the concentrating Manchun. And there were spawns from left, the right, and then the south here, which is the main spawn. It was quite a fun map. The Far Forest doesn't look like a lot, and it wasn't. This was mostly a Fog of War map. I never really got into what that is, but most D&D games kind of already do that already, where you don't get to see everything on the map at once. But that's because normally most games are fought one fight at a time, whereas in Fire Emblem it would not be. So the whole map was barely legible unless you knew the area well, and the player's goal was to get 2 people from point A up here at the top left to down here at the bottom right. The enemies had artillery and archers up here on this cliff, and they had faster moving people close in the gap on either side towards the characters' positions. And they were in the dark about most of it, only seeing about 30 feet ahead of themselves. Unless they had the NPCs with them, then that was 60 feet. Being up here on the ledge and capturing actually doubled your sight distance. And then that was it to note for map design. This was another attempt at a defense map. I shortened the time because this is during an actual ongoing game to 6 rounds. I had to do that literally mid-game, where there was endless reinforcements spawning from the south here, and then from each of these tents. You can see the main temple was the same thing, where there's just a middle concentrating spell to banish all the undead coming their way. There was difficult terrain here too, and then the river. So most of the enemies were coming through the south and then from the left. And then on turn 3, there was a plank of wood. I couldn't find the image for it. It was a plank of wood that was placed, much like the bridge, that also let the enemies on the right come. There were weaker walls, about 15 to 25 HP each, that was defending the keep, and you got bonuses for being behind them. Now, this didn't go as well because one of the players just cast the Vitriolic Sphere on the left, and that whole side was out of the game. That it didn't matter what I spawned in, they would die instantly. And then the right just took too long to approach because they also slowed their descent with other spells, and they just went to ham on the center, ending up defeating the boss before the term limit. And then I think this is the last one. It is the last one. This is kind of the capturing objective, where they spawned on this little island down here at the bottom, and they were to light each of these 4 fireplaces in the middle to burn away the tree and rescue a player character. They could cross the little rivers here in between, but it would be a dex saving throw, or else they would fall in and take a lot of acid and necrotic damage. There was also grave spots here for spawning in more enemies, and they had a 10 limit turn count. Turn count. Well, the gate spell was open on the south here, and they had to make it there, and they had to make it back. What ended up happening is the players spread out. There was some 5 player characters. They spread out to each objective, and they did it a lot faster, but the way out was all blocked because most of the enemies conjugated on the 2 people who stayed behind on the bottom here, and that made passage the backtrack back very difficult, as they had an unkillable boss to face. Because I assumed they would train it or just avoid it all the way through it here, but they didn't, and they tried to fight it, and we almost lost more characters than they tried to save. So that was quite nice. So that's the end. Like, comment, subscribe. I didn't say that in the right order. If you have any opinions, leave them in the comments below. Peace, everybody.